It may not look like a template that you see on Word. Put the content down that lights you up and makes you feel good about yourself. How it's designed, worry about that later. Just get all the information out. Don't worry about 2 pages. I know people usually start their resume and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be at 2 pages, and they're trimming before they even put all the information down. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how to approach your resume rewrite and doing it in a way that's going to actually lift you up. I know, it sounds kind of crazy. Before I dive in, I want to say for those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, and I'm the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting. The work that I do is to help folks to blast through their inner critic narratives, create new ones, and live their biggest life. If you want to learn more about what I do and how I can support you, please visit CoachTosca.com. So let me first say that I rarely engage in just resume rewrite work. And there's a very particular reason for that. And I actually talked a little bit about it in my previous episode. So if you missed it, go back and listen to that one, which is about what not to do first when you're in transition or looking for a job. That advice was basically don't touch your resume first. So go listen to that if you haven't, and then come back and listen to this episode, which is when you're ready, when you're energetically in a good place, when you've done some clearing of your past that's holding you back, that's still making you feel bad. Come back and listen to this episode where I will be getting into the conversation around how do you approach your resume. So assuming that you're feeling good, you're excited to look at your narrative, to rewrite, then I'm glad you're here. The first thing I want you to know is that you may want to actually not start with the resume you already have. You may just want to start completely from scratch and not have any of the previous language to then look at and tweak. I think this approach is best when you haven't touched your resume in a really long time, or if you feel like your resume was written in not the best energetic space, or you're just not happy with it. Like if you're not happy with it, you can just start from scratch. And I know that might sound daunting, but let's chunk it out a little bit, okay? Let's not make it feel so daunting for you. I feel like resumes are an amazing place for you to just be so proud of your journey and what you've accomplished and the impact that you've had. And it's like you get to brag about where you've been and brag about yourself and talk about yourself. First and foremost, take on the mindset that you want to have about what this document is for you. If resume is kind of makes you shudder a little bit, or you hate that word or something, reframe it for what a resume actually is. For you, maybe it's a place where you get to tell your story. Maybe your resume is a way to tell people about yourself. One of the things I always say to my clients is a resume's purpose is to get you a conversation. It's to intrigue the reader so much that they just want to talk more about your experience. And I think when you think about it this way, it puts a little bit less pressure on what this document is supposed to do. I think some people go in to this and say to themselves, well, this resume has to get me my job. No, there's no freaking way your resume is going to get you a job. It's going to get you a conversation. It's going to get your foot in the door. So let's take the pressure off of what a resume actually is. It does a lot of heavy lifting for you, but it's not all the lifting. And especially considering how you're looking for your next job and what you're doing, it might be a very small piece of the pie. When I'm doing this work with clients, I kind of look at it like, let's zoom way out. Let's not look at the nitty gritty details right away. Let's zoom out and start to look at your journey from a more higher level perspective. I think that that can involve just not even looking at a piece of paper yet, not looking at your computer. I'm so old school talking about a piece of paper. Who uses paper anymore? No, I'm kidding. And just consider, like, where did you start? Where have you been? Give yourself a little time to, maybe even, yeah, get your colored pens and your markers and pull out construction paper and just kind of plot out your different landing points in your career. And like maybe not even start with a Word document and really lay out the roadmap that you've been on. I think that can be really helpful because you're not worried about saying the thing exactly. You're just like, hey, where have I been? You can take that a next step further and say, like, what did I learn? What impact did I leave behind? What was my legacy? Like, if it calls to you to actually start in a more creative mode with your resume, then do that. Do that. Take that broader perspective, start to look back and see how your experience led to the next experience and what the reasons were behind each transition. So, for example, and you may have many reasons for each transition. So, for example, for me, when I went from Unilever to Absolute Vodka, my intent was that I wanted to go from certain knowledge in marketing that I had acquired being in consumer packaged goods to different types of marketing skills that I would get being in a spirits industry because there's different tactics, there's different skills, all that good stuff. So that was one of my why did I move? There were many other reasons. And so you can list those down. One reason why you left might be, right? You were leaving a toxic work environment. That's okay. Write that down. And you can also write not just what you were leaving, but what you were going towards. So maybe you were going towards a person that you were really excited to work for. Maybe you were going towards a new industry. Maybe you were going towards a location that was closer to your home because you had new priorities now. Like just capture all of that free form. You can do it on a piece of paper. I mean, if you want, you can do it on the computer, but just start to look at the bigger picture of where you've been and why you've gone where you've gone. One of the things that our inner critics can do is make us forget that each step that we took was very intentional at the time. And it was based on what we needed at the time and what wasn't working for us. You may have this embedded narrative in your head about, oh my gosh, I totally left that job because my manager was a disaster. And that might be true, but there's probably five other reasons why you were leaving and you were going towards something else. So give yourself a little bit of space to work through that. Okay, so that's zooming out, right? And looking at the broader journey and just starting to get a little excited about, like, wow, yeah, I've done some things. The next piece is to zoom in really deep and start with your most recent experience. This is the process I use with my clients. You're getting all this amazing tips for free. And I'm so glad because I want you to have a resume you feel really good about. So, what I want you to do is focus on getting in the car. And getting in the car, when you look at each of your jobs, is about looking at the context of your role, the actions you took, and the results that you provided. And by doing this, by taking this car approach, what you're going to do is you're going to better understand the impact that you had in your job. So it's not about capturing your job description and all your job responsibilities. It's about saying, what was the context? What were the actions? And what were the results of that action? So that you can more fully honor the impact that you had. Oftentimes, people don't include, hey, I stepped into an inaugural role, or I stepped into a role in which there were extreme budget constraints, or I stepped into a role after somebody was fired and the team morale was really low. And all of this background does matter. and how you position it gets deeper into the process. But what I'm saying is when you honor what that context is, then your results really pop in a bigger way and you can more clearly see the impact. And some of the actions that you took might rise to the surface that you normally bury. For example, the how of your job. The actions that you took, for example, may have been I took a collaborative approach to this role because there was so much fear and anxiety given that the person before me had been fired. Now, I'm not saying that all of this would be the final language in your resume, but what I am saying is that it will go a long way for you to really own and honor your journey and what you accomplished along the way. I want you to then do this process for every single job. And only when you've done that do I want you to then consider the summary of your resume. Don't worry about the summary until you've looked at all the pieces of your resume and have looked at a new thread that you can find within it in terms of the story that you want to tell in that bigger narrative. The other big piece of how I want you to approach your resume is from a whole life perspective. So I do not want you to omit things that need to be on your resume or need to be honored. And that might range from being the CEO of your household to taking a year-long break and doing all kinds of amazing things during that break. That might mean certifications that you got. Maybe you got a yoga certification, anything in your life that shows who you are, that honors that you're about growth, that expresses yourself. A lot of people leave interests off of the resume. I'm a big believer. Keep interests on because that's the human part of the resume that people want to connect with you. Again, if the goal is getting somebody to want to have a conversation with you, if you put something on there like rock climbing and you've got a hiring manager that loves rock climbing, then yeah, why wouldn't they want to call you? They already found a connection personally. So you want to have your certifications, you want to have your interests. In some cases, I even put a section on values. But I think if you're doing your resume well throughout, the values will be clear. But you can also have a value section. Heck, you can have any kind of section that you want. Here's the thing about resumes I don't think you need to worry about the rules. I know it sounds a little crazy. My perspective on resumes is that this is a beautiful place for you to feel empowered and in love with your journey. And it may not look like a template that you see on Canva. It may not look like a template that you see on Word. Put the content down that lights you up and makes you feel good about yourself. How it's designed, worry about that later. Just get all the information out. Don't worry about 2 pages. I know people usually start their resume and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be at 2 pages and they're trimming before they even put all the information down. So the process that I use is put it all down on paper. Make it 10 pages. I don't care because the next steps is about iterating and cutting and trimming and refining your story and your narrative. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I want to give you this information because I think it's all about finding the mojo and recommitting to your mojo and your narrative and doing so in a way that honors where you're going and not necessarily where you've been. And actually, the next topic in my podcast is going to be about that piece of understanding where you're going. Because I think what happens with people is they don't know where they're going and that feels overwhelming and they get stuck and don't do anything because they're like, well, I don't know what I want next. And so I want to share some thoughts about that in the next episode. But for clarity's sake, I'm keeping this to the resume tips. So I've given you kind of the big pieces of how I approach resumes and how I think it can be transformative for you to approach it this way. If I can support you in you getting to a resume that you feel amazing about, that you just want to put in everybody's hands, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find an exploratory call link in the show notes. You can also reach out via toscadimatteo.com/contact. And I'm happy to figure out how I can support you, whether that's with some resume writing or a bigger conversation around some coaching to support you in getting your mojo back and getting your confidence back and addressing any inner critics that might be hanging around as it relates to your career journey. I love helping people feel good and fulfilled in their career because it's been a huge focus in my life. So I look forward to hearing from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share this podcast. I would be so grateful. It helps me to continue to do this great work. And I'm so glad you joined. I hope to see you next time. And ciao for now.